All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're digging into a pretty provocative theory about a future conflict between the United States and Iran. So let's just jump right into the big question our source material is asking. Can a global superpower actually be defeated by, $500 drones? The argument we're about to unpack claims that the answer is a big, fat yes, and that it could happen a lot sooner than you think. So, where does this come from? Well, this is the startling prediction from a game theory expert the source just calls Professor Sign. And to build its case, this source claims his two previous, very specific predictions about Donald Trump have already come true. And look, the stakes here, according to this analysis, are just incredibly high. We're not just talking about a military outcome, but something that could threaten the entire global economic system. So what is this so-called secret script that the source claims is already unfolding? Okay, first things first, let's really understand the core claim here and the logic that's being presented to back it up. So you see what's happening here? The source is basically building its credibility on this claimed track record. By framing the first two predictions as already fulfilled, it sets up the third one, the really shocking one, as not just some wild possibility, but maybe even an inevitability we need to pay attention to. So how exactly would this defeat even happen? I mean, how could the US possibly lose? Well, this prediction isn't based on what you might think, armies and jets facing off. No, it's about a totally different kind of warfare. Now, according to the source, you have to understand this isn't some spontaneous conflict that just popped up. Nope. This is supposedly the culmination of 2 decades of careful, meticulous planning by Iran. It's seen inside the regime as the final, decisive battle against what they call the Great Satan. Okay, so this idea of asymmetric warfare, it is absolutely central to this whole thing. You've got to get this to see their point. It's not about fighting fire with fire or matching strength for strength. It's all about finding your opponent's weak spot, their Achilles heel, and hitting it over and over again. So what's the weapon at the heart of this whole strategy? Well, according to the source, it's this little guy. A single Iranian Shahed drone. Super simple, easy to mass produce, and costs, get this, about $500. And this is the cost to shoot down that $500 drone. We're talking $2 million for just one US interceptor missile. You can already see the problem, right? The math just doesn't work. And this chart, man, it just lays out the core mismatch perfectly. It's a financial bleed out in the making. You've got one side spending millions to counter threats that cost just a few $100s. The source literally calls this a battle of economic attrition, a war that, from a purely financial perspective, America is supposedly guaranteed to lose. Okay, but it gets even deeper, because what's really interesting here is that the source claims the real target, it isn't the US military at all, it's the US dollar itself. So for decades, this system has been the bedrock of the US economy, right? It creates this constant worldwide demand for the dollar, which keeps it strong. The whole theory hinges on this. If you break that cycle, the entire American economy could come crashing down. And then the source lays out this, well, it's a pretty frightening chain reaction, a domino effect. It argues that these small-scale proxy attacks on things like water plants or energy facilities in the Gulf, they could kick off a global crisis that stops the flow of petrodollars back to the US and pop, goes what the source calls the current AI bubble in the stock market, exposing the whole system as a house of cards. Okay, so this begs a pretty huge question, right? If the risks are so insanely high, why on earth would any US president walk into what sounds like a perfectly laid trap? Well, the source offers up 3, let's just say, highly controversial reasons. So, according to Professor Sini's analysis, you've got 3 big reasons. First, simple military overconfidence, thinking you're unbeatable. Second, powerful political and financial motivations for some very specific people. And third, well, this is where it gets really weird. A much deeper, almost hidden motive that's driving this whole thing. Right, and this last reason, this is where we go way down the rabbit hole. The source straight up alleges that this conflict has nothing to do with normal geopolitics. Instead, it's supposedly being orchestrated by secret societies to fulfill some kind of end times prophecy, basically starting a great war no matter what it costs the rest of us. So at the end of the day, the source's main point is this. It doesn't matter who wins on the battlefield. By the time the dust settles, the petrodollar system could be shattered, and America's global influence buried. It's a strategic loss, even with a military win. And that's really the final chilling paradox the source leaves us with. It paints a picture of a world where traditional military might, tanks, jets, aircraft carriers, it's all irrelevant. It doesn't matter because you're facing a strategy that's not designed to beat your army, but to bankrupt your entire nation from the inside out.